Today we're going to extend our learning from what we talked about in class. Tonight we're going to actually calculate the circumference of a circle. Now the circumference, if you remember, is the distance around the circle. In other shapes we call this the perimeter. So the distance around the circle can be calculated by measuring it, or it can be calculated using one of the circumference formulas. So in order to calculate it using the formula, you will need to have one of two measures. You can either have the diameter, which is the distance across the circle through the center, or you may be given the radius, which is the distance from the center to the outside of the circle. Depending on which one you are given, one formula may be a little bit more efficient than the other. So let's just review the formulas. The formula to find circumference of a circle, if you have the diameter, is C, which stands for circumference, is the same as or equal to pi. We are all going to use the rounded name for pi, 3.14. No sign means times, and D stands for the diameter. It's an equation that we can substitute and then solve. Remember, equations are what we worked on in our last unit. Now, if we're not given the diameter, instead we're given the radius, we still have C for circumference equals, but now we have 2 times, no sign means times, pi, we're still going to use 3.14, and instead we're going to be using the radius. Because remember, 2 times the radius means the exact same thing as the diameter. So either one of these formulas will work in order to find the circumference. So let's take a quick look at the steps that are listed on your note sheet. We are going to solve these using the algebraic process. That means we are going to write the formula, number 1. Step 2, we are going to rewrite it, but showing our substitutions, always using 3.14 as pi. Then we will write the answer. You will always round your answer to the nearest hundredth. That's 2 place values past the decimal, unless you are told to do something different. Finally, we're going to correctly label, we're going to use our correct label and units. Okay, so let's get started. Let's try a couple. We're going to work actually down the left side of the page. I'm going to save the right side for you guys to do as your you tries. So looking at this first circle, we are asked to find the circumference. I notice I'm given the diameter, or the D. So the more efficient formula is to do circumference equals pi d, or if it helps, pi times d. That's my first step, write the equation. Step 2, substitute in what we know. So we don't know the circumference. We know that pi is going to be 3.14, and I know my d, which is 4. So no sign means times 4. And finally, I'm going to write my answer, which is, if you use your calculators, which you are allowed to this unit, you don't have to, but it'll make this go a lot quicker. We end up with 12 and 0.56, 12 and 56 hundredths. Now I'm asked finally to do the correct label, so it's 12 and 56 centimeters. I'm going to use the label from my diagram here. This right here is the algebraic process. We're going to expect to see this on every problem. Formula, substitute, solve. Okay, let's move down the page. Again, we're going to work straight down the page. So now I'm looking at this picture here. In this picture, my radius is 16 millimeters. So in this case, this would be the more efficient formula to use. I could use this and calculate the diameter if I wanted, but I'm going to show you how to use the other formula. So we start by writing the formula. 2 times pi times r. You can use these dots if you need to, or you don't have to. So I don't know my circumference. 2 stays 2. Pi, we're going to substitute with 3.14. And I have my radius, which is 16. So now I'm going to use my calculator, multiply straight across, round to the nearest hundredth if I need to, and I end up with 148 hundredths. 2 numbers past the decimal. I need to do my final step, which is to label. So we have 148 hundredths millimeters. Okay, let's flip the paper over, and now we're going to take a look at a couple different kinds of problems. Again, we're going to work on the left-hand side. The problems on the right side will be your homework for tonight, your practice, your U-tries. All right, so in this situation, we have a little bit of a word problem here. It says the circumference of the circle is 8 792 thousandths inches. What is the diameter? So I see circumference and I see diameter. So, but I noticed that I've been given some different information this time. Since we're talking about circumference, I'm going to still use the circumference formula. And it has the word diameter in it, so I'm going to use the formula that includes the diameter, which is circumference equals pi times diameter. Now, when I read this carefully, it says the circumference is 8 792 thousandths. That means I'm going to replace C, or circumference, with that number. Pi is 3.14, and now I don't have my D. That is what I am going to calculate. We need to think back to our unit on solving equations. This is now a one-step equation. So I have to isolate D, because that's what I'm trying to calculate, and I have 3.14 times D. The opposite of 3.14 times is to divide by 3.14. Here's where your calculator will come in handy. Please feel free to use it. 8.792 divided by 3.14 is going to give me 2.8, or 2 8/10. That means that my diameter is 2 8/10 inches. Let's take just a second and look at this. This is a little bit different because we were missing a different value, the diameter. We had to do a different operation in order to solve it. Let's try that again, and actually I'm going to move to the right on this one, and I'll let you do the bottom 2 problems on your own. If I read this problem, it says the circumference of the circle is 43 9/600 centimeters. What is the radius? So we're missing the radius on this one. Again, I have circumference and radius, so I'm going to use the formula for circumference that has the radius in it. In this case, they gave me the circumference, which is 43 96/100, 2 times 3.14 times r. Okay, so now I need to simplify this side first before I can do any dividing. You can divide in 2 steps, divide by these 2 numbers, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this side the same, and I'm going to multiply 2 times 3.14, and I get 6 28/100, or 6.28 times r. So now I only have to divide once. R is attached to a times 6.28, so I'm going to do the opposite and divide both sides by 6.28. When I do that, I end up with 7 as an answer equals r. So in this case, my radius, this distance here, is 7 centimeters. So this is 7 centimeters. If they asked me to calculate the diameter, I could multiply 7 times 2 and say the diameter is 14 centimeters. Okay, so there's 4 problems left for you to try. There are 2 on the front and 2 on the back. Give those a try, and as you're working through, think about if you have any questions that you do not understand, and or what things you really do understand. Also remember, you are allowed to use a calculator to solve these problems, and show all your steps in the algebra process or format. So you should have equal signs, and you should be solving it like we did in our equations unit.